It's Daniel, aka Danny Gossip Girl. I've got the scoop on Bravo and Blinds. Let's go. When the stars come out to play, you know where to stay. Tune into the buzz, it's the talk of the day. From Bravo shows to the latest celeb spree, we've got the tea, come sip it with me. Danny Gossip Girl, pop culture expose.
Welcome to Pop Culture Expose, where the glitter fades and the real stories shine. I'm your host, Danielle Peterson, and we're about to dive in deep into the truth behind the headlines. If you love deep dives, debunking juicy blinds, and all things celebrity gossip, then you need to like, follow, and review Pop Culture Expose, your new obsession. Oh, and if you're catching us on YouTube, you're in for a treat because there are tons of visuals to paint the picture as we break down the truth behind the headlines. Also, check out my Danny Gossip Girl account on Instagram and TikTok. Trust me, you won't want to miss a second. So go on, hit that subscribe button, and let's get into it. In the very first episode of Pop Culture Expose, we are taking you on a whirlwind journey through the birth of pop culture itself. From the 19th century's rise of entertainment to the dazzling golden age of Hollywood, we'll uncover how this cultural phenomenon took root, but it doesn't stop there. Get ready for a deep dive into the juiciest blinds of Hollywood's golden days, courtesy of the infamous Auntie, with a special focus on none other than Judy Garland. I'll be joined by my fabulous guests, Cassandra Crose and Kimberly Bryant, to break it all down and spill some insider thoughts you won't want to miss. So buckle up, it's going to be a wild ride through pop culture history.
Danny Gossip Girl, Pop Culture Expose. We're spilling all the secrets every single day, from Hollywood lights to the gossip.
Welcome to the dazzling world of pop culture, where history is anything but boring and every moment is packed with intrigue, glamour, and unforgettable surprises. Imagine a world where movie, music, fashion, and fads collide in a spectacular dance that is thrilling as a blockbuster movie, as catchy as your favorite tune, and as captivating as the most jaw-dropping celebrity scandal. Our journey begins in the 19th century, when pop culture was just starting to take shape. Picture a time when the vaudeville shows and early cinema flickered into life, setting the stage for the entertainment extravaganza that would follow. As we travel through the decades, we'll encounter iconic figures, revolutionary trends, and cultural shifts that have left an indelible mark on our collective imagination. From the roaring 20s and the birth of jazz to the glitz and the glam of the Hollywood's golden age, the rise of rock and roll, the psychedelic swirls of the 60s, each era truly offers its unique flair and excitement. And as we dance through the disco fever of the 70s, groove to the MTV generations of the 80s, and explore the grunge and tech revolutions of the 90s, you'll see how pop culture has continuously reinvented itself, keeping us all on our toes. So buckle up and get ready to dive into the captivating saga of pop culture, a whirlwind tour through the highs and the lows, the stars and the scandals, and the timeless moments that have made our world a bit more fabulous and a lot more fun. Step back in time to an era where the world was on the brink of something extraordinary. The late 19th century to the early 20th century. This is where the dawn of pop culture, a time when the seeds of modern entertainment were first planted. Imagine it, the air buzzing with excitement as new forms of art and media began to capture the imagination of the masses. But beneath this veneer of the innovation lay tales of ambition, rivalry, and groundbreaking moments that would shape the world as we know it. Now, it all started with the printing press. Imagine newspapers so affordable that everyone from well-to-do to the working class could get their hands on them. In the early 1800s, this was revolutionary. Suddenly, news, stories, and yes, gossip were accessible to the masses. The penny press became a powerful tool, not just for spreading information, but for shaping public opinion. Scandals, celebrity exploits, and sensational headlines grabbed readers' attention, setting the stage for the tabloid culture we know today. But with great power came fierce competition. Newspaper magnates like Joseph Pilzer and William Randolph Hearst were locked in a battle to dominate the newsstands, each striving to outdo the other, more dramatic stories and more lurid details. The stakes were high and the world watched spellbound as the press became not just a source of information, but driving force in pop culture. Now picture a world where the stage was the ultimate form of entertainment. The late 19th century saw the rise of vaudeville, a theatrical genre that offered a mix of comedy, music, dance, and drama. Vaudeville shows were a feast for the scenes, and they became the breeding ground for some of the first true celebrities. Imagine the thrill of watching Harry Houdini, the master escape artist, defy death night after night. His every performance more daring than the last. Or the comedic genius of the Marx Brothers. Those antics on stage left audience in stitches. Vaudeville was where stars were born, where the ordinary became extraordinary. But behind the curtain, there were stories of rivalry, of acts competing for the spotlight, and the constant pressure to outshine the competition. And then came the phonograph. Suddenly, music just wasn't something you heard at a concert or in a parlor. It was something you could bring home. Thomas Edison invented in 1877 his invention that would change everything. For the first time, people could listen to their favorite songs whenever they wanted to. The phonograph didn't just bring music into homes, it brought the fame to musicians. Imagine the excitement of hearing Enrico Caruso's powerful voice filling your living room, or dancing to the ragtime rhythms of Scott Joplin. But with this new technology came challenges. Musicians had to adapt to the idea of recording their work, of capturing the perfect performance in one take. And as records began to sell by millions, the music industry as we know it was born, with all its drama, rivalries, and the race to become the next big thing. As we step into the early 20th century, the lights dim and a new form of entertainment takes center stage: the motion picture. Silent films were a marvel of their time, transporting audience to worlds that they had never imagined. The flickering images of the screen were more than just stories. They were spectacles that left viewers breathless. Imagine sitting in a packed theater, the air thick with anticipation, as the legendary Charlie Chaplin, the little tramp, waddles onto the screen, his expressive face and impeccable timing invoking laughter and tears without uttering a single word. Or the sweeping drama of D.W. Griffith's The Birth of a Nation, a film that would go down in history for both its technical brilliance and its controversial themes. But behind the scenes, the film industry was like the Wild West, full of untapped potential and cutthroat competition. Studios scrambled to sign the best talent, and stars were born overnight and to be discarded just as quickly. The silent film era was not just a time of innovation, it was a time of incredible risk and reward. And then there was The Great Train Robbery, released in 1903. This 12-minute silent film was one of its first of its kind, a narrative film that told a complete story. Audience were captivated by the thrilling tales of outlaws, daring escapes, and a climatic shootout. It was the film that introduced the idea of the blockbuster, the must-see event that everyone was talking about. Picture the gasp of the audiences as the notorious outlaw, played by the actor Justice D. Barnes, turns directly towards the camera and fires his gun. It was a moment that shocked and thrilled viewers, leaving them clamoring for more. The Great Train Robbery was more than just a film. It was a phenomenon that paved the way for Hollywood we know today. And as movies took off, so did the public's appetite for the lives of the stars that graced the silver screen. Enter the tabloids. By the early 20th century, publications like Photoplay and Motion Picture Magazine were devoted entirely to the private lives of celebrities. Scandals, romances, and feuds were splashed across the pages, feeding the public's insatiable curiosity. Imagine reading about the love affairs of the silent film stars like Rudolph Valentino, whose every move was more scrutinized by the press, or the mysterious death of Olive Thomas, the beautiful actress whose untimely demise sparked endless speculation. The tabloids didn't just report the news, they created it, turning celebrities into myths and their lives into soap operas for the masses. And as the 1920s roared on, a new technology emerged that would bring pop culture to every corner of the nation. Radio. For the first time, people could tune in to hear the latest music, drama, and news, all from the comfort of their own homes. Radio just wasn't entertainment. It was a lifeline to the outside world, a way to stay connected in an era when the world was changing rapidly. Imagine gathering around the world and the radio with your family, listening to the latest episode of a thrilling detective drama, or tuning in to hear Franklin D. Roosevelt's fireside chats.
You people must have faith. You must not be stampeded by rumors or guesses. Let us unite in banishing fear. We have provided the machinery to restore our financial system, and it is up to you to support and make it work. It is your problem, my friends, your problem no less than it is mine. Together, we cannot fail.
Which comforted millions during the Great Depression. Radio created stars like never before, from crooners like Bing Crosby to comedians like Jack Benny. It was a time when voices rather than faces became iconic, and the power of the airways changed pop culture forever. And there you have it, the dawn of pop culture, a time when the world was on the brink of something incredible. From the birth of mass media and the rise of vaudeville to the magic of silent films and the radio revolution, these were the moments that set the stage for everything that would follow. It was an era of innovation, of larger-than-life characters and public hungry for more. The curtain had just risen on the greatest show the world had ever seen, and the audience was ready for whatever came next. Picture this. The world is shaking off the dust off of World War I, and a new era is about to explode on the scene. The Roaring 20s. It's a time of dazzling access where music is hot, the drinks are cold, and the energy is electric. Welcome to a decade where the rules are rewritten and the thrill of the moment is everything. Hold on to your hats as we dive into the wild, glamorous, and scandalous pop culture moments of the 1920s. The 1920s hit like a bolt of lightning with the birth of jazz, a sound so new, so daring that it took the world by storm. Imagine walking into the smoky speakeasy, the air thick with the scent of gin and tobacco, as the rhythms of jazz band pulse through the room. Louis Armstrong, the trumpet king himself, is on stage, his horn blazing with energy, each note a revelation. The crowd is in trance, swaying to the beat, lost in the music. But jazz wasn't just music. It was a movement. It was a rebellion against the old ways, a celebration of freedom and expression. The older generation might have been scandalized by its wild, untamed sound, but the youth embraced it with open arms. Jazz was a heartbeat of the roaring 20s, and it was here to stay. Enter the flapper, the iconic symbol of the 1920s. Picture a young woman with bobbed hair, a sleek dress that stops scandalously above the knee, and a cigarette holder dangling from her lips. She's dancing the Charleston, her feet moving in a blur, her laughter ringing out over the jazz band. This was the new woman of the 20s, bold, daring, and unapologetically modern. But behind the glamour of the flapper was a story of rebellion. These women were challenging the strict social norms that had governed their mothers' lives. They cut their hair short, drank in public, and dated freely. Actions that would have been unthinkable just a decade before. The flapper wasn't just a fashion statement. She was a cultural revolution, a symbol of a new kind of freedom, and society didn't know what hit it. Now, imagine the lights dimming. In a grand, ornate theater, the crowd hushes as the projector whirls to life and the first flickering images appear on the screen. Welcome to the golden age of Hollywood, where movies were the new obsession and stars were born in a blink of an eye. The Roaring 20s saw the rise of the first true movie stars. Names like Charlie Chaplin, Clara Bow, and Rudolph Valentino, these larger-than-life figures captivated audiences with their charisma and talent, becoming household names overnight. But the silver screen wasn't just about entertainment. It was about dreams, about escape, about living vicariously through the dazzling life of the stars. And then in 1927 came a moment that changed everything. The Jazz Singer, the first feature-length talkie, a film with synchronized sound, stunned audiences. Imagine the shock and awe as Al Johnson's voice rang out, clear and true from the big screen. It was a cinematic revolution, and there was no going back. Hollywood had found its voice, and it was louder and more powerful than anyone could have ever imagined. But let's not forget all about Harlem, a neighborhood in New York City that became the epicenter of a cultural explosion. The Harlem Renaissance was a flowering of African American art, literature, and music that shook the foundations of American culture. Imagine walking down Lenox Avenue, the night alive with the sound of jazz pouring from the clubs like the Cotton Club and the Savoy Ballroom. Inside, Duke Ellington is playing a set that sends shivers down your spine. while Langston Hughes, the poet of the people, sits in a corner, penning verses that speak to the soul of the nation. The Harlem Renaissance wasn't just about art. It was about identity, pride, and defiance. It was a declaration that African American culture was a vital part of the American tapestry. This movement redefined what it meant to be an artist, a musician, and its impact would resonate for generations to come. Now, picture a grand mansion on Long Island where the lights never dim and the party never ends. This is the world of Jay Gatsby, the mysterious millionaire who threw the lavish parties in the hopes of winning back the love of his life. In F. Scott Fitzgerald's The Great Gatsby, a published in 1925 book, it captured the essence of the jazz age, the glamour, the excess, and the inevitable downfall. Gatsby's stories was one of illusion and tragedy, a mirror of the decade itself. The Roaring Twenties were a time where wild abandoned, but underneath the glitz was a sense of impending doom. The stock market crash of 1929 was just around the corner, ready to bring the decade of decadence to a screeching halt. But in the moment, as the champagne flowed and the jazz played on, it felt like the party would never end. And of course, what would the 1920s be without its scandals? That decade was rife with the tales of high society, drama, and intrigue. Think of the Fatty Arbuckle scandal, a beloved comedian whose career was destroyed by accusations of manslaughter, or the trial of the century, the case of Leopold and Loeb, two wealthy college students who committed a murder just to prove they could get away with it. The public was riveted by these stories, hungry for every lurid detail. It was the birth of modern celebrity culture, where fame and infamy were two sides of the same coin. Finally, no discussion of the Roaring Twenties would be complete without mentioning Prohibition. Imagine a time where alcohol was illegal, but speakeasies, secret bars, hidden behind unmarked doors, were everywhere. The ban on booze didn't stop the party. It just made it more dangerous, more thrilling. Gangsters like Al Capone became celebrities in their own right. Their exploits splashed across the front pages. The line between criminal and pop culture icon was razor thin, and the public couldn't get enough. So there you have it. The Roaring Twenties, a decade of jazz, flappers, Hollywood glamour, and scandal. It was a time when the world seemed to be spinning faster than ever, when the future felt bright and limitless, but beneath the surface, shadows loomed, and the crash that would end it all was just around the corner. For now, though, the music played on, the champagne flowed, and the world danced as if there were no tomorrow. Picture it, the glitz, the glamour, and the undeniable magic of Hollywood in its prime, the golden age. From the 1930s to the 1950s, this was the era where stars were made, legends were born, and the silver screen was the ultimate dream factory. But behind the glittering facade lay tales of ambition, scandal, and power that shaped the very fabric of pop culture. So grab your popcorn, dim your lights, and let's dive into the most iconic moments of Hollywood's golden age. The transition from silent films to talkies was like flipping a switch on the world of cinema. Imagine sitting in a theater in 1931, the lights dim, and suddenly instead of music, you hear voices, captivating voices. It was a revolution. The biggest stars of the silent era were either swept away or transformed as Hollywood embraced this new technology. Enter Gone with the Wind in 1939, a film that wasn't just about sound, but about scale, about spectacle. When Scarlett O'Hara, played by the incomparable Vivien Leigh, vowed she'd never go hungry again, her voice echoed in theaters across the country. This wasn't just a movie, it was an event, the ultimate showcase of what Hollywood could do. And it was just the beginning. Behind the scenes, Hollywood was like a well-oiled machine with studios like MGM, Warner Brothers, and Paramount pulling all the strings. Stars were under ironclad contracts, and their every move, every smile, every scandal was controlled by the studio heads. Moguls like Louis B. Mayer and Jack Warner, they were kingmakers, turning unknown actors into household names. But with great power came great drama. Take Judy Garland, the beloved star of The Wizard of Oz in 1939. She was America's sweetheart, yet behind the scenes, she was pushed to her limits by the demands of the Hollywood studio system. The pressures were immense, the stakes even higher. Hollywood in the golden age wasn't just about making movies. It was about creating icons and sometimes breaking them. Legend has it, as a side note, Alfred Hitchcock, the master of suspense, played a surprising role in one of Hollywood's most iconic images, the MGM lion roar. When MGM was looking to capture that famous lion shot, Hitchcock stepped in and with his film expertise, advising on how to safely shoot the big cat in all of its roaring glory, using clever camera angles and techniques to keep the crew safe. Hitchcock helped create a cinematic moment that still gives us chills before every MGM movie. Who knew the king of thrillers also had a hand in making the MGM a legend too? Now imagine a night where all of Hollywood's biggest stars gather under one roof, dressed to the nines. They are thick with anticipation. This was the birth of the Oscars, the most glamorous night in showbiz. It all started in 1929. But by the 1930s and 1940s, the Academy Awards had become the ultimate symbol of Hollywood success. Picture it. Bette Davis in 1939 gripping her Oscar for Jezebel. That was filmed in 1938 and released, her eyes shining with triumph. Or Clark Gable, the king of Hollywood, striding down the red carpet with an effortless charm that made him the envy of men and the desire of women. The Oscars weren't just an award ceremony. They were the crowning glory of the Hollywood dream, where stars were cemented in history. But even as Hollywood basked in its own glow, there was a shadow looming over it, the Hays Code. Introduced in 1934, this strict set of rules governed what could and couldn't be shown on screen. No more risque scenes, no more crime without punishment, no more anything that could corrupt the public's morals. Yet, this didn't stop filmmakers from pushing the boundaries. Take Casablanca in 1942, a film that managed to tell a story of passion, betrayal, and war, all while navigating the tight constraints of Hays Code. The result? One of the most beloved films of all time. With a kiss that left audience breathless, Hollywood thrived under these restrictions, turning them into opportunities for creativity and suspense. When World War II broke out, Hollywood didn't just sit on the sidelines. it went to war. Stars like Jimmy Stewart and Clark Gable enlisted, trading their tuxedo for uniforms. While studios churned out propaganda films and patriotic blockbusters, Hollywood just wasn't entertainment. It was a morale booster, a symbol of American strength and resolve. And then there were the Hollywood canteens, where stars like Bette Davis and Marlene Dietrich served coffee and danced with soldiers, bringing a touch of glamour to the gritty realities of war. The connection between the stars and their audience had never been stronger. Hollywood was no longer a dream factory. It was a part of the national effort. Its stars seen as real-life heroes. As the world ended and America entered the post-war era, Hollywood took a darker turn. Enter film noir, a genre dripping with shadows, dangers, and moral ambiguity. Picture Humphrey Bogart, the ultimate anti-hero, in The Maltese Falcon in 1941, or The Big Sheep in 1946, navigating a world where everyone has something to hide, and nothing is as it seems. These films were a stark contrast of the glamour of the early years. They were gritty, cynical, and filled with characters who were as flawed as they were fascinating. The femme fatales, like Barbara Stanwyck in Double Identity in 1944, were as deadly as they were beautiful, and the detective was as troubled as criminals they chased. Film noir was Hollywood's dark underbelly exposed, and audience couldn't get enough. As the 1950s rolled in, the golden age of Hollywood began to show cracks. The studio system, once so powerful, started to crumble. The advent of television lured audiences away from the theaters, and the Supreme Court's antitrust rulings forced studios to sell their theater chains. The once mighty moguls found their grip on Hollywood slipping. But even as the system faltered, Hollywood continued to produce some of its most iconic films, like Sunset Boulevard in 1950, which was directed by Billy Wilder. And it was a chilling reflection on the very industry that made it. A story of faded glory and the dark side of fame. And then there was Ingrid in the Rain in 1952, a joyful celebration of Hollywood's history, even as it faced an uncertain future. So there it is, the golden age of Hollywood, a time where dreams were made on celluloid and when stars were larger than life. And the world looked to the silver screen for escape, inspiration, and a touch of magic. It was an era of glamour and scandal, of power plays and iconic moments that have become etched in the collective memory. The curtain may have eventually fallen on the golden age, but its legacy shines brighter than ever, a beacon of what Hollywood was, and in many ways still aspires to be.
The gossip blinds, catch the news, don't get left behind. Don't miss this, don't miss this.
Please note that this next portion may have some trigger warnings, as there are mentions of essay sexual assault. From scandalous love triangles to wild Hollywood debauchery, Enty from Crazy Days and Nights has spun some of the juiciest blind items from the glamorous yet gritty golden age of Hollywood. Some of them seem almost too good to believe. Well, that is because they are. Let's kick things off with the legendary tale of Marilyn Monroe and JFK. Enty's blind would have you believe that Monroe wasn't just a lover, but a pawn and a secret government plot. In reality, while Monroe's connection to JFK is no secret, the idea of her being a CIA agent or involved in some high-stakes espionage, total fantasy. Then there's the blind about Rock Hudson, Hollywood's matinee idol, and his alleged secret fixer who would silence anyone who would threaten to out his private life. While Hudson did have to hide his true self due to the social climate, these blinds paint a picture straight out of a noir film, a bit exaggerated to say the least. And how can we forget the bizarre tale of Howard Hughes, supposedly locking starlets away for weeks at a time, using them as muses and puppets? Sure, Hughes was eccentric, but the blinds take this to levels that belong in a Hitchcock thriller rather than a history book. Enty also loved pushing blinds about starlets like Judy Garland, who was reportedly subject to all kinds of unspeakable things by studio executives. The tragic truth is Hollywood did have a dark side when it came to child actors, but Enty's version often strays into over-the-top conspiracy territory. At the end of the day, these blinds are just like a twisted game of telephone. Small truths wrapped up in layers of dramatic fiction with just enough glitter to make you wonder, could it be real? So let's get into one of the blind items that Enty lawyer, aka John Nelson of Crazy Days and Nights, not really an entertainment lawyer, wrote on June 22nd, 2012, and he revealed who it was about a week later on July 4th. And this is Blind Items Reveal number 39, Old Hollywood. In this space, I've written about several of the exploits of Eddie Mannix, but most of those involved paying off a couple of people or finding a willing reporter. There was once a time, though, where Eddie paid off nearly 24 people, all to keep his studio bosses happy. There have been a lot written about a party held one night that resulted in SA of a chorus actress and how Eddie bought off jurors and even the SA's victim's lawyer. It is quite the story and absolutely ruined the life of the actress. Instead of the $400K she was offered, a 7-year contract, she got nothing, and nothing happened to her SA abuser. When no one asks is why the studio goes to such great lengths to protect a salesman, SA abuser, they didn't put on the full court press because of the salesman. They did it because they didn't want anyone focused on what else happened that night. There was a 15-year-old who was there. She was going to be the studio's biggest star. She had been putting off the studio head and the executive second in charge. There had been some groping by both men, but she refused to sleep with them. That night, though, they didn't give her a choice. The studio boss and the executive took turns assaulting her. They tried to get her drunk, but she refused. Several people were standing outside the room where it was taking place and watched it happen. There are stories that because of it inspired the salesman to do the same thing. Others said the salesman was ordered to SA someone at the party so that all the guests would talk about that one and not the one by the two of the studio bosses. In her very unfinished biography, the actress talks about both men, but only refers to the groping. She had barely written anything about before giving up on the project. In the publisher's archives, there are letters which refer to it, though, as well as her unfinished manuscript. Eddie managed to keep everything quiet by focusing the world's attention on the chorus actress. And it supposedly has to do with Patricia Douglas, MGM, Judy Garland, The Wizard of Oz, and Louis B. Mayer. The blinds about Judy Garland, particularly those from Crazy Days and Nights, paint a disturbing picture of her treatment by Hollywood executives, going far as suggesting that she was systematically abused in every imaginable way. While it's widely known that Garland suffered immensely during her time in the spotlight, definitely used by the studio system, the blinds often inflate these tragic realities into salacious and exaggerated conspiracy theories. Here's the real story, guys. Judy Garland was thrust into Hollywood at a young age, signing with MGM at just 13. As a teenager, she was subjected to the studio's control, including a highly restrictive diet, as they believed she didn't fit the ideal image of a glamorous starlet. She was constantly given pills to keep her energy up and sleeping pills to help her rest. This brutal cycle led to her lifelong struggle with addiction, which plagued her career and personal life. In addition to the physical demands, Garland was under immense pressure to always deliver the charm and magic MGM expected. It's true that studio executives were emotionally abusive, often criticizing her weight and appearance, which deeply affected her self-esteem. The most infamous example of this is how Louis B. Mayer, the head of MGM, reportedly called her his little hunchback because she didn't fit the typical Hollywood beauty standards at the time. However, the blinds NT pushes takes these truths and turns them into something more sinister, suggesting that Garland was not only emotionally and physically manipulated, but also the victim of repeated SA by Hollywood elites. These claims are not entirely implausible given the era's dark underbelly, but it's hard to prove and often rely on hearsay. In contrast, documented accounts of Garland's life, including her own interviews, memoirs by her daughter, Lorna Luft, and friends like Mickey Rooney, focuses on the emotional and psychological damage the industry caused her, rather than supporting more extreme accusations. The exaggeration comes in with Auntie's tendency to lump Garland's genuine hardships into broader, more grotesque conspiracy that lacks verifiable sources. While it's clear that Judy faced horrific treatments, especially as a young actress, not every detail in these blinds can be backed up. Much of it feels designed to shock rather than to inform. What was really going on in her life? Garland's struggle with addiction, her string of failed marriages, and her battles with depression became public knowledge later in her life. She had a tough time maintaining relationships, both personal and professional, and the constant pressure to be perfect on and off screen haunted her until her untimely death in 1969 and at the young age of 47. NT's blinds, while possibly based on whispers of truth, inflate these tragic elements into grander Hollywood horror story. It is a case of truth being stranger than fiction, but fiction still trying to take the spotlight. For the premiere episode of Pop Culture Expose, I have asked my fellow content creator, podcast hosts, and most importantly, soul sisters to join me today. Thank you, ladies. So, joining us today is someone who truly embodies a love for the history and drama of pop culture, Cassandra Crose. Our paths crossed almost a year ago as we both had collaboration with the man behind the blinds, anti-lawyer, but her experience has forever changed her life and honestly the worst of ways, but she's hopefully going to come out on the other end of the rainbow at the end of all of this, hopefully. But details on this can be found on any of my Danny Gossip Girl accounts and upcoming once we get to episode 9. We're not going to get into that today, but Cassandra is a pop culture enthusiast who has an incredible talent for uncovering forgotten gems from Hollywood's past and connecting them to stories to today. With a deep knowledge of classic cinema and a passion for all things entertainment, Cassandra brings a fresh perspective to the early history of Hollywood, bridging the gap between then and now. She really loves herself some nostalgia. We're excited to dive into her encyclopedia knowledge of history and hear her take on the stars of yesterday continue to influence the stars of today. So, welcome, Cassandra.
Wow, thank you. What an introduction. That's
Very
that's amazing. Yeah, thank you. And I do say like the motto of Cassandra Explains It All is we're taking a magnifying glass to all of our treasures from the past, and sometimes when you take a magnifying glass to things, it's like you get a picture, a way up closer picture of what's going on. You might learn new trivia. Also, you might find some disturbing things that you want to burn with that magnifying glass, right?
beautifully
Absolutely.
said.
hmm
Beautifully said. And before I pass it off to our next guest, Cassandra, I want you to explain to the audience real quick, and before we forget, how can everyone find you?
Imagine me as Clarissa, basically. And I do a podcast called Cassandra Explains It All, but I also do a podcast called Drenched in Drama, which does explore, the uncovering of NT Lawyer, the man behind the blind items. And I go into detail about our relationship, and I've kind of branched out into covering lots of different types of predators, and really just this web of celebrity gossip and how it's so toxic to our culture, but also how gossip is essential to our culture. And of course, like you said, like there's a lot of nostalgia sprinkled in too, because I'm just like an 80s, 90s kid.
A girl after my very heart, and thank you so much.
But and sorry,
Yeah,
and just to answer fully, I mean, you can find us on Patreon is where the more R-rated stuff is going to be. But I do have, Spotify, Apple, pretty much anywhere you can find podcasts and Instagram.
so make sure to check out Drenched in Drama. Next up, we have, and I'm thrilled to introduce the co host of the popular podcast, Pop Culture Green Room, Kimberly Bryant, who I've had the pleasure of collaborating and becoming friends with this year as well. Kimberly's podcast dives into the juiciest pop culture moments, exploring everything from the hottest scandals to the stories shaping Hollywood. She brings a sharp, witty, and insightful voice to every topic. And today we're lucky to have her sharing her expertise on the creation and evolution of Hollywood. Kimberly's knack for finding the connections between pop culture's past and present is unmatched, and we can't wait to hear her thoughts on the early days of Tinseltown and how it led us to the glitz and the glamour of award shows today. So, welcome to the show, Kimberly.
Thank you so much. And what an introduction. Thank you. Oh my gosh, that was so great. Not only that,
I'm
but
trying
I'm so
to enter my channel, my inner Ryan Bailey. So hopefully I did
no,
that.
it's funny. While we were here, I started following Cassandra's Instagram. I'm like, oh my gosh. So I am obsessed. I didn't realize, oh my gosh, the NC Lawyer podcast. I didn't know that was you. Oh my goodness. Okay. This is fun.
That's
It's
a
gonna be
whole other
exciting.
deep dive we'll get
Yeah, I
in.
know. I know.
But yes.
But it's so
Interesting. Yeah.
relevant to what you do. And just like having
Hmm.
women like you in this space is harm reduction in itself, right? I mean, because you can tell gossip in a way that a man cannot because of your lived experiences as a woman.
But Kimberly, thank you so much for joining today. You were one of the first to have me on your podcast as well, both of you ladies. But if you could please let the audience know where they can follow you and what anything else you would like for them to know about your podcast and yourself.
Sure. Let's see. I collided started a podcast with my twin sister a little over a year ago. It really started as a concept we had because we thought about the idea about 3 years ago because I was living in San Diego. She was still right outside of New Orleans. We don't have much in common, but the one thing we had in common was our love for pop culture, celebrity gossip, news stories, all that juice. And so we were like, why not start a podcast? So we started it, just got it going. And the great thing was we actually utilized our degrees that we had spent all this money on our college education. So my background is in mass communications, broadcast journalism. That's why I have my bachelor's degree. Blair is organizational communications. So we do come together and kind of have that commonality. But it's fun. I absolutely love it. We're following our family's footsteps in the entertainment industry in a way. This is a little bit
Definitely.
different. There were a lot bigger screen. There are bigger screens now, and also Broadway. But you know what? It's like getting where you fit in. So, but yeah, you can find us at the Pop Culture Green Room on Instagram, also on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, and TikTok. It's a little tricky. It's the Pop Culture Green Room, and we're also on X at the Pop Culture Green Room.
Perfect. Thank you, ladies. Now let's dive into some of the pop culture aspects. First of all, I want to start off every episode as always. While every episode will change throughout, the consistent thread will be the love for pop culture. So ladies, is there a particular moment or a story that first sparked your passion for pop culture? And I'll start with Cassandra first.
I gave this a lot of thought because I know you were saying like in the context of early Hollywood, right?
At early
Definitely.
Hollywood or all together, whatever works.
I think I have too many answers. Like definitely the Wizard of Oz and just hearing that all of the weird things that happened on the set of the Wizard of Oz and like the conspiracies and it's haunting and things and like Poltergeist, which is a whole can of worms that we'll get into one day, Danny,
Oh
with
yeah,
Heather,
that is an upcoming episode very soon. Maybe
Right.
episode
And
3 or 4, hopefully.
Fred Rogers and his speech to Congress in 1969.
Oh yes.
That sticks out to me. And it's something I think about every week. I mean, and also when I was young, I was probably 6 when my dad gave me the VHS tape of Freaks. And it, that movie, I mean, I don't know if you know much about it. It came out in 1932, but it was really controversial. It's actually still really controversial, but they used real sideshow freaks and it was like in the horror genre. It was MGM, very old, Hollywood scandal. And, still to this day, it's an interesting conversation that I have all the time with my friends about, where is the line with creativity and responsibility and the outcasts of society and art and things like that, right?
Mm-hmm. And then also profiting off of someone as well in certain scenarios, kind of like the freak situation.
Yeah, I mean, and film scholars have interpreted it as a metaphor for like class conflict and it, being reflecting like the Great Depression. And it's been studied for its portrayal of people with disabilities. With theorists arguing that it presents like an anti-eugenics message. So I don't know, definitely just things like that. Like I've always been interested in film and art. My dad was in radio, my grandfather was in radio. So I feel like it's just
Oh,
always kind of been a part of my life, you know?
lovely. And how about you, Kimberly?
So let's see here. It's funny that Cassandra mentioned Wizard of Oz because when you talk about pop culture, and when I looked at the years between the 1930s and 1950s, that's actually one of the first things that came to mind. But for me, I would definitely say music is really what sparked off my love for pop culture, and just growing up and just growing around up with my father, listening to a lot of like jazz music and blues and R&B, and just growing up in South Louisiana, and then
So
him coming
cool.
up. Oh, thank you. Him coming up was very fascinating because our grandfather and our relatives, they owned nightclubs where famous people like James Brown performed and Sam Cooke. So he got to see all these artists come through. So that right there just sparked an interest and a fascination for me, like, and that genre, that era of that time period. And for me, like Wizard of Oz, like that's whenever I was like really like, okay, I want to dissect everything. Sometimes like people now, like they've got like their careers and different things that they're interested in, like how things move and like what fascinates them and what they're passionate about. For me, it was like thinking about the Wizard of Oz, I just wanted to know more about what's going on. How do they make this happen? Like, what are these effects that are being used? Who makes these costumes? The costumes are what really
Yeah.
fascinated me. The sparkles, the um, just the brightness and the things that pop. And
The
I was
color
just
changing
fascinated by it.
horse. How did
Yeah.
that
Oh, yeah.
happen?
Definitely. And it's just and just the fact that these people were able to become someone else, like on television, and that's not who they were in real life. It just fascinated me as a child growing up. And then not only that, but I got to also see my cousin on television growing up. So, and acting and performing. So that was really fascinating. So I had her to look up to. And but yeah, I would say that's definitely where my fascination and love came from. So it's like Cassandra said as well, it's kind of like a family thing for me. So yeah, I would say that's my answer in a nutshell.
Thank you for sharing. And for anyone who does not know, do you mind sharing who your cousin is?
Not at all. So my cousin I was referring to is Deborah Pratt. She's an actress, director. She directed Grey's Anatomy, Magnum PI. She was on years ago too. She was executive producer also for like Airwolf, creator of the show Quantum Leap, executive producer of the reboot as well of Quantum Leap. And her daughter, also my cousin, obviously, is Troy and Bellisario that starred on Pretty Little Liars. So that's all
Thank
like
you.
our, yeah, my
Yeah, keeping
family. And
it
her
in the
mom was on our
family with
podcast
entertainment.
a few weeks ago, actually. So yeah, a nice little family
Yeah, it was a
affair.
great episode. Very, very woman empowerment episode. I can't say like
Thank you.
either of you guys that have anyone from the entertainment industry. I was just a latchkey kid that grew up in front of the TV and had to raise my two sisters. So that's how I got into it. But we mentioned the film of Wizard of Oz. So was that the first film or a pop culture moment that left a lasting impression on you, or were there any other movies that left a lasting impression on you?
For me, I would say that wasn't the only one that left a lasting impression on me. The next one I would say into like my adult phase, grown woman phase, I would say a streetcar named Desire. Like that was right there. Like that was a film, a play actually that was adapted into a film, and it just like really drew me in. That's like when I really got to learn about Marlon Brando. He became like one of my favorite like pastime
Ooh,
actors, and that's when I started to kind of do research. So I'm like, I was like, okay, let's see about heartthrobs back in like years ago and all these things. So
yeah, he was
it was a
definitely one.
right. And it fascinated me, and especially with the background of it, with it like being based in New Orleans. So it's kind of like it was,
Oh,
yeah,
I
I
didn't
would
know that.
definitely say that's where like it just kind of like came naturally. And then from there I would actually look for older films that were made like outside of like not outside, but like within Louisiana, New Orleans, because that's where it's kind of like, and then just snowballed from there, to be honest.
Hmm. Any other movies or moments for you, Cassandra?
I mean, Moments is such a can of worms, right? Because I remember being young and seeing John Benet Ramsey's face on magazine covers, like in the
Mm,
grocery store line when I was a kid.
yeah.
And,
Mhm.
that kind of being like the first taste of like not Hollywood, but just like scandal and like sensationalism. Um, and like OJ, the Simpson trial was really big when we were young.
Mhm.
Um,
Yes,
definitely.
plastered everywhere.
Yeah, and like my mom was always
Oh
watching
yeah.
old movies when I was a kid. Like I was very big into Audrey Hepburn, um, like Bell Book and Candle. I liked classic. I liked black and white movies. Um, but I don't know. I do think that there's so many moments, but when you talk about like old Hollywood, maybe the Fatty Arbuckle case, I think might have been the first like old
Oh
true crime
yeah.
Hollywood thing I got into.
Yeah, I just recently learned
Mm.
about that. And the murder, I had no idea. I've always heard him reference over the years, but going through the history of pop culture has kind of been an emotional experience
Hmm.
for me. And I really realized my first love, and I told my husband this, thank goodness he still loves me. Pop culture is my first love, you know? But it was just such a trip to learn that because you always hear Fatty Arbuckle, but in a lot of times he's talked in a good way. At least I've heard over the years, maybe from my dad and other folks and stuff. But I couldn't believe that murder,
Oh,
Cassandra.
and
That was
I would be
wild.
remiss not to mention like the whole discovery of like the Andy Warhol, Peter Max, Grey
Oh
Gardens,
yeah.
Kennedy era, right? That whole
Mhm.
wormhole.
Oh, 1000%. Yeah, you can't forget
That's a good
that.
wormhole, though.
That's true.
Fitzgerald,
Hmm.
right? It takes you into
Oh
like
yeah.
American literature and like to bring it back to Troyan, like um
Hmm.
with Marlene King, she writes Now and Then. She's talking now and then she's talking about Thomas Wolfe, one of the greatest American writers, is talking about you can't go home again. And that's a theme we see throughout American literature forever, and it's like it's beautiful, and that's what makes up like American spoken word folklore. And a lot of that stuff becomes like a part of our pop culture.
That's
Very well
so
said. Wait a
true.
minute.
Hmm.
The writer of Now and Then wrote Pretty Little Liars?
Yes.
Oh, I didn't even know
You just
that.
blew my mind.
Oh, I didn't know
You
that.
just blew my mind. Two of my
And it makes
favorites
sense
that
if
make
you
so
think
much
about
Oh.
sense
it,
now.
because like it's all about friendship.
Totally.
It's all
Oh,
about
that I
Totally.
didn't even that didn't even occur to me. Oh, that's so funny.
Wow.
Oh, more trivia I didn't
The
know.
more you
See, learn something
know.
new every day. I like this. See, this is why I
Yes.
was excited about
Thank
it.
you,
That's so
Cassandra.
funny. Yeah, oh yeah. And actually, speaking of true crime, if you don't mind me asking this little question, have any of y'all ever watched the show A Crime to Remember? Because we're talking about like dated, like kind of like it was a show on investigation discovery. It actually won an Emmy. It didn't last long. They canceled it after a few years, but it was like one of the best like directed and produced like true crime series on investigation discover, in my opinion, because it was they focused on crimes that like made that like um were like basically like pivotal moments, basically in pop culture and in news and history. Like they covered like the shooter from Austin, Texas, like that shot the people like at the University of Texas.
Mhm.
They covered that case and not the Black Dahlia, like some other ones, like famous
No, that's a good one.
kind of infamous cases. But it just made me think of that whenever we were talking about the some of the
that
crimes.
sounds so good.
No, I
Yeah,
haven't
that's pretty
seen
good.
that. It sounds very interesting, and I love shows like that or unsolved mysteries. I
Almost
just
hosted
like
it for a
those
little bit.
shows, though.
Hmm. Well, and
Yeah.
that brings up
But
another
I also
one.
want to sleep at night, so I don't watch too much of that. But go ahead, Cassandra.
No, yeah, another one I was gonna mention was Coast to Coast, right? Like a lot of us grew up listening to Coast or Loveline.
Oh, Love
Oh
Line.
yes, Loveline. I was thinking about that the other day.
But like,
I forgot about Love Line. Yeah.
Yes. So speaking of Loveline, I really feel like that is one of the most modern, even though Loveline was a bit ago. I feel old just thinking about it and how much I learned from Loveline. But I feel like that is one of the most modern moments that ties back to the late 19th to early 20th centuries, where everyone was
Mhm.
around the radio listening to this knowledge or this enticing story. I feel like
Appointment
that
programming.
was
Mhm.
one of the first shows to bring you back to that appointment, programming on radio, or sometimes I think if you were watching it on MTV, late at night, shows like that, and also,
Mhm.
Howard Stern really brings it back to that time period.
That's so true. I remember like late night radio. It was so much fun, especially
Mm-hmm.
like the older you got. Like that was like your chill time. Like if you weren't going out like at night with your friends or whatever, that's what I did. Like especially when I was in college. That was yep.
Yeah, and that was my sex education. Oh,
I'm like, oh God, I
lordy.
was talking about like that was in college. I was
Oh,
like, I'm really showing my age.
I can't get started on Dr. Drew and Adam Carolla because I am unapologetically a huge fan of Loveline, and I like it's sick how much Loveline I've listened to. It's sick. Like it's not good.
It's
Oh, that is so funny.
been a hot minute since I listened to it. Um, but going back to Dr. Drew, not diving into Dr. Drew, but I feel like Dr. Drew has at times dealt with controlled stars. We won't get into his practices, like that's a whole other deep dive, and people can go any which way on that. That's not what today is for. But thinking back to the golden age of Hollywood, that is very romanticized.
Which his mom was a
But there
famous
was very
actress, by the way. Silent film
oh, I
actress. Yeah.
forgot about that.
Oh, that's
Cassandra, I
right.
love
I heard that
you.
on a podcast a few months ago, actually. Yeah, I didn't even know that.
Oh, connecting the dots. I love you, Cassandra. Um, but while it was, put up on this pedestal, there were those crazy studios that was controlling stars like Judy Garland, Marilyn Monroe, the demises
Mm.
of them.
Shirley
Rita
Temple.
Hayworth, Betty. Yeah.
Hmm.
Oh God. So there was just a lot of controlling taking place. Thinking back to then, what do you think about that time period, and also how it shaped today and stars that maybe Dr. Drew has dealt with, or Britney Spears and whatnot? What do you ladies think?
I feel
Maybe
like
starting with you first,
back then,
Cassandra.
oh, I'm sorry.
Or
Oh,
go ahead. No, no. Go ahead, Kimberly.
I feel like it's like when you really look back at it, it's sad because it's an eye opener, or especially given what today's 2024. And when you look back, and especially when I look back at like my parents' generation, my grandparents' generation, it's like it was like that was the cultural norms. Like women were supposed to have like their place, in society, and even like in film and work on set. It's like they were being controlled, and I mean, so much was going on that's not acceptable, and you couldn't do anything about it. You couldn't talk about it, and it's sad because it even still goes on now. I think right now people have more of a voice, um, and they're vocal about it. But back then, it just seems like it's so crazy. It was just so acceptable, and it had to be accepted. And nowadays, it's like you can speak up and fight against it. And like,
You
look at us
can, but
now, like
it's
three
still
women.
definitely going on. Oh, yes.
Yeah, definitely. Hmm.
And if a woman knows how to speak up, it is Cassandra. Oh,
I can tell
can't wait to
you, I have
get
a
into that
friend.
story, but go ahead, Cassandra.
I have a friend who's an actress who just had a horrible experience that many people told her to go to the police about, and she refuses to because the guy is a somewhat famous actor, and she's just afraid it'll ruin her career. So, I mean, it's like, yeah, it's like twofold, right? Because even though some
Hmm.
things have gotten better, there's still just a lot of things that haven't gotten better or just still need to evolve. And then, like, the microcosm of all of this media that was shoved down our throats about like women being crazy and lesser than, and
Hmm.
the anorexia culture with like Mary Kate and Ashley, and like all Shirley Temple, and using these child actors that look way younger, but they're older, and disposing of them and like just fetishizing children, it deeply impacted our society, like
Yeah.
deeply. And
Hmm.
I mean, just as a woman, I know I'll never not have an eating disorder because of the way that we were raised and the media we were shown, you know? Um, and then there's also the aspect of it of like the cultural appropriation of culture, of like these, like even something I did an episode on Sublime. I thought it was going to be a cool nostalgia episode. Come to find out, it's like all lifted from Black artists, stolen music, you know, and we see that
Oh.
as far back as like
Mm.
Elvis and the Beatles and like just appropriating from all these cultures. Um, and you know, it's so I just think it's so important for us to have an intention behind the art that we create and the things that we put out into this world. Because there are so many people out there that are just putting out content for money. And I don't
Hmm.
think, you know, that's a new thing. Like that's been going on since old Hollywood. You know, they were Shirley Temple was made to fetishize, like it was made for the male gaze, sadly.
And then you have Amanda Bynes as the modern version, and we
Yeah.
see
Oh God, yeah,
how
and how
that has turned
tragic.
out.
I know. Oh, it's
Yeah.
so tragic and it's sad. And the one thing what makes it reminds me of, like child actors and everything. Like, because whenever y'all brought up Shirley Temple, it just made me think it's because for a long time I just never thought that it was such like an impact or a problem until like years later. It's like, I mean, like years later for me when I grew up and I started to like to dip into the
Yeah.
entertainment industry and I started to figure out and discover like more and more. I was like, oh my gosh, I was like, this is crazy. It's like it's the way that even kids are just being like sexualized and everything. And it's like
Hmm.
and it's true. Like what are your intentions behind everything that you produce? Because it's a lot of people, they are mass producing content just to do it just to make money. And I'm
Right.
glad to see that we're not like that.
Well,
Obviously,
and
like we've
Yeah.
got, just mhm.
and it's like not just the entertainment industry as far as movies and TV, Danny, right? Like it's also the music industry. And that's what we saw with
Oh,
Aaron
yes.
Carter. Like we
Mhm.
saw Aaron Carter be
Mhm.
like put on that child star pipeline until he died, you know?
Yeah, used and
That's so
abused.
true. Mhm.
But Kimberly, I've been thinking about it a lot lately because I've been rewatching Pretty Little Liars from the start. And
Ah.
especially after listening to your interview with your cousin and her upbringing and how she raised Troy and her kids,
Mhm.
which not everyone in Hollywood and young Hollywood is lucky enough to have that upbringing, that background, that
Right.
making sure your head is on straight, you're
Mhm.
doing the right things. I hope one day you get the opportunity to interview her and just find out what an impact that makes because there are others on the show that have gone down other paths at time along with
Mhm.
other young actresses, so it's wild.
Oh, no, definitely, for sure. Like, I will say, yeah, I would love to have, Troy on a podcast. We're gonna work on it. It's a work in progress, but the good thing is I will say this, that the way that their mom had just like raised them and brought them up, it's like she raised them with responsibilities, like, and just to let them know that they're fortunate. They've that they're fortunate compared to a lot of other kids growing up. There's a lot of people who didn't have what they had and who had the background as well. And what I did appreciate, I really did like, because of course, Tori, she started off acting when she was young, when she was little. That was fun. That was fun, just watching your cousin like little, like close to your age on TV and everything. But what I liked was the fact, actually, what I loved was that Deborah pulled her out, like when she got to when she was at a certain age, she pulled her out of acting, and she just made her, she had her be a kid, like go to school and work on her education and live and do activities, and then whenever she was old enough and she was grown and was in college and then got out of college, it's like she made the decision that she wanted to continue her mom's footsteps, her dad's footsteps, family and the
Yeah.
entertainment industry. And the girls got talent. I mean, come on now. So, but I would definitely say like this, their their bearing and their wheeling had a lot to do
Yeah.
with it. I mean, it's great, and I love it. I appreciate them for it. So,
Yeah, for sure. They're definitely the blueprint of hopefully how Hollywood parents are. Um, Speaking of Hollywood parents in Hollywood, most recently was the Emmys that took place, so award season is
well,
taking
that's right.
place. Yes. And part of early Hollywood was the start of Hollywood award shows like the Oscars, which started in the early 20th century. So, what do you ladies think was the original purpose behind creating such shows and how it has evolved over the years and the purpose, whether or not it's the Emmys or the Teen Choice Awards or MTV Music Awards? Not that there's any music videos, but what do you guys think?
Oh, for the music videos, you got to go on YouTube now.
Yeah.
Um, my thoughts are it's definitely evolved. It's grown a lot, but then we still have like a long way to go. Like I was watching, was it just recently? It was for the Bear. It was one of the actresses on the Bear, and I forgive me, I can't
The
remember her name, but
female?
she was yes, and she just recently just like
The
what
first
won an Emmy.
Latina?
Yeah,
Yes. Lisa Colin Zayas. That's who I wanted to
that's
mention. Such an amazing accomplishment. She was
isn't
the
it?
first Latina to win Best Supporting Actress.
But at the same time, it's kind of
It
like you
should
look
have
at it,
happened a long time
it's a
ago.
long time
Yeah,
ago.
yeah.
Yeah, and that's where it's like I'm saying it's kind of like we still have a long way to go in
Mm-hmm.
society, and you could still see the racial barriers. It's where it's everywhere, and it's where things are just it's hard to break in, and especially with Hollywood. But like I said, it's like 2024, and she's the first Latina actress. Like that kind of blew my mind a bit. But then again, I wasn't surprised at the same time. So.
Yeah, I feel like the ultimate meaningful purpose of an award show and those accolades, I don't know, I just feel like it's really hidden by a lot of secret hidden truths and
Mhm.
purposes that have evolved over the years. I love watching it from afar, but I'm sure Cassandra, you have some things to say about kid award shows.
Well, yeah. I mean, I feel like I loved the MTV Music Awards, the Nickelodeon Kid Choice Awards. Now looking back with Brian Peck and all of them, it's super creepy. It's a couple things, right? Like it's
Mhm.
in we know that in like 1946, soldiers come back from the war and young couples are like kind of resuming their daily lives. And that means that people are attending movies again. So I think that that contributes to why we see all of these award shows coming into play. But there's also been extensive writing as to like why basically it was kind of a coup just of but like by rich white men to executive directors like to kind of circle jerk and give themselves awards and like keep all the talent and money concentrated in one place
Mm-hmm.
and like Metro Goldwyn Mayer and that they had established the Academy Motion Picture Arts and Science Awards in 1927. So I mean it goes pretty far back. And
Yeah.
I think although one of my favorite award like stories is when Charlie Rich burned John Denver's award in 1974. Do you remember that?
No, I'm
His
not
country music
familiar.
Oh,
award.
yeah. Oh, that's news to me. That's very new to me.
No, do tell,
Oh, fill us in.
Cassandra.
Yeah. I want to know.
It was at the Country Music Awards in 1974, and Charlie Rich was presenting, and he goes to read the award for Best Country Musician, and the winner is John Denver, and he lights his award on fire. He got banned from the awards for life, and some say that the incident was like a bold protest against basically the infiltration of on country music by pop. right? And like
Hmm.
pop acts like John Denver, which I find really interesting. And like people have argued whether it actually was or he was just drunk and high, but it's just such a
Maybe
fascinating
both.
story to me.
Right.
So you probably wouldn't have been too big of a fan of Beyonce's moves over the last year, I imagine.
All of that old country is steeped in
Hmm.
so much history. There's a podcast I would recommend for anybody who's into like Americana and country music history dating back like 1920s and up. It's called Cowboys and Rhinestones, or sorry, Cocaine and Rhinestones. And they're turning the second season into a book, an audiobook. So yeah, definitely check them out. It's really good.
Cool.
Yeah, definitely will.
So thinking back to this past weekend's Emmys, are there any surprising wins or snubs that stick out in your heads at all? I know we mentioned Lisa Colin-Zayas from The Bear winning her as the first Latina as a supporting actress. Any other ones that you guys can think of?
Not that I can really think of. That was the one that stood out to me the most. To be honest, like I had so much going on. I didn't even really get caught up with with it, with
Totally
the
get
Emmys. Like, so
it.
that was, yeah. Oh my
Another
gosh.
one
Like,
that I loved is Cassandra, I imagine you have watched this, maybe. And maybe you too, Kimberly, the new girl or new girl.
I
Did you ever see
haven't.
that?
yeah, I
No?
haven't. Yeah, I haven't seen.
Oh, I'm
Yeah.
surprised. Well,
I know one
Lamont,
would think that that was a show that I would have watched, but yeah, I didn't.
it's a really funny show. It might be good to watch if you ever want to binge watch something. It's good to have in the background. Super funny.
Yeah,
Belly
and I'm
laughs
in a
galore.
bingeable
Everyone
mood.
is so talented on that show. Talk about a stacked cast. But Lamar Morris, who is one of the funniest people in the cast, he just won for supporting actor in a limited series. But for the show
Okay.
Fargo, which is like wild to
Hmm.
imagine, because he came from the
Mhm.
show New Girl, which is such a comedic show. You wouldn't picture him being in something like
Okay.
Fargo. But the reason why I loved it the most, because the moment when he found out he was even nominated, he found out in
Hmm.
front of his little daughter, who might be like 5 or 4 years old, and he was just like hysterically crying. She's like, "Why are you crying?"
Oh,
So
that's
to
so
see
cute.
that and then to see him on stage win and how far he's come in his career, it's really amazing. So that's one that I enjoy the
I
most.
mean,
Oh.
I have friends that were very triggered by Baby Reindeer and hated it, and they were upset that it won so many awards. I will say I was happy the morning show won for something. That was cool.
Oh, it did win for something? Yeah, okay. I started to watch it. I need to catch up with it because one of my friends is on it.
It's so good. I love
Yeah,
it.
I've only watched the first two
Oh,
seasons. I don't have Apple TV is the only streaming service I
Hmm.
probably don't have.
yeah.
Just
But
wait till the
over
new season comes out, and then you can binge all of them at once, you know?
okay,
And I was,
perfect.
yeah, I started watching it. And, it's so funny because I need to text him because he's supposed to come on our podcast. I can't remember who he played, but I started watching it. I've only like two seasons, no, like two episodes into season one. So like I was like new and fresh into watching it, but like I haven't started like in a while.
Think you'll both enjoy it so much because it delves into like how news disseminates and how gossip disseminates and all of that. I mean, it is like right up
Oh,
both your alleys.
yeah, oh, for sure, definitely. Let's see. I'm trying to see, but yeah, I don't like I said, I started watching it. I definitely want to pick up and watch it because I'm in my bingeable season right now. I want to binge all the shows that I haven't seen.
Real quick, just some last minute questions. Kimberly, your podcast, Pop Culture Green Room, it explores various facets of celebrity culture. What themes from early pop culture have you found still resonate today in the entertainment industry?
That is a good question. I would definitely say it's the older generation that still holds the power in Hollywood. I think that you could still kind of see the residue of it. You could
Yeah,
still
that's very
see that
true.
it's yeah, that it's still there while it's trying to change and evolve. You could
Mm-hmm.
still see that where it's like that hold, but and that pull, but it's starting to die out. So it's
I
kind of
agree.
it's very fascinating, but and then also it just sees the way that I see how modern technology has played such a huge role, just even from growing up as a kid. I mean, I'm 43 years old now, but it's just like, oh my God, it's like things have just changed and advanced so much. And then I just rewinded back years with like 20 years even before I was born, and just how differently things were back then. It's crazy. It's just it's so weird. It seems like it was 200 years ago, and it really wasn't. Just with the advancements corporation of it, with especially with how we get our news now, like people have their cell phones and they're sending screenshots and videos and things to like TMC, and things are getting reported that way, so it's not always someone with a camera like on site,
Yeah.
and that fascinates me because it's different. Because back when I used to always be into started getting into like pop culture and celebrity news, it was like Bop magazine, like those magazines and everything. So it wasn't, we didn't have like what we've got now on the computers and everything. So yeah, that's my take.
And Cassandra, in your work, you have come across, or have you come across any stories or hidden gems from early pop culture that you feel is really under discussed or forgotten today?
Uh, definite too many to count, but and I know how psychotic what I'm about to say is gonna sound, but okay. You know the Aaron Carter song I Want Candy?
Yeah.
Hmm.
I know a lot of people know like it was a remake, right? But I did a
Right.
deep dive into the cultural phenomenon of the song, and like strangely the strangely timeless song released by the Strangeloves in 1965 has a deep-rooted connection to tribal drumming. And the Strangeloves were inspired to write I Want Candy after they took a trip to the 1960 fair for World's Fair, and producers saw a performance by Candy Johnson, who was a dancer. And she was known as Miss Perpetual Motion. So she's like a whole thing in herself. And
Oh.
it's so interesting because they would rock bands back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. They're looking for inspiration, right? They've already mined the blues scene in the South, okay? And now they're going to like these other countries, India, Africa, and they're getting these tribal drumming beats, and sounds from all over the world. And producers are bringing them back and bringing them to these Lou Pearlman type like formulated bands, like think the Archies,
Uh-huh.
and coming up with things like I Want Candy. And so much of our music history is unknown, or like
Yeah.
most people don't know it. So that's one that I found that
Yeah.
I think about all the time. And just like I've been working on a book about Brittany Murphy that's kind of like a coffee table book, and it's quotes that I've collected from celebrities, just random 90s celebrities that I've interviewed about
Hmm.
Britney. And
I
so
love that.
Oh wow.
that's fun. And I don't know, just like really the work that I'm most proud of is like my interview with Mitchell Kriegman, who did Clarissa Explains It All and Bear in the Big Blue House, because I think he's such an icon for like children's television, and Mark Summers, who is such a good guy. And I don't know, I think that we have to put these people that are intentionally putting good things out into the world, we have to, put these people on a pedestal and talk about them more.
I
Yeah.
agree.
And then because yeah, I just do. I think that there's like a responsibility that comes with it when we're talking about even pop, like even pop culture, that we're talking about social issues.
Last question for both of you, lady. What is the one historical pop culture figure that you would love to cover in depth in your podcast, or let's say even interview, like in your dream world? because you feel like their influence is still relevant today. So what do you think?
Yes, I'll start because I've got,
Yeah, go for it.
okay. No, if I can interview anybody, I'll be honest, it would be Adam Carolla, only because he's such an enigma. I don't know. In my mind, like, I grew up listening to him. He's the ultimate podcaster. I do not agree with almost anything he spews lately, but I just think he's interesting and I'd love to pick his brain because, pro tip, if you go back and listen to all those Loveline episodes, they had celebrities on them, like 90s celebrities that have blown up now.
Mhm.
And they were saying wild things because they didn't think that those were going to be recorded. So
I believe that.
I've done like entire episodes of Marilyn Manson on Loveline. Just some
Oh,
of my
wow.
greatest research has come from old Loveline episodes, but I'd
Very
love,
interesting.
right? I'd love to deep dive into like Loretta Lynn because she was probably the most progressive trailblazing country music singer ever. And I haven't done any episodes on her, and like Dolly Parton, and I don't know. Yeah, there's just so many that I would love to deep dive.
In due time, Cassandra.
Yeah.
Any last minute thoughts for you, Kimberly?
I'd say if I had to go back and like interview somebody and sit with them, I've thought of it. It took me a little while, but Billie Holiday. Like if I had to
Oh,
go
that's a
back in
good
time and just
one.
because just
Yeah.
like the hard life that she lived,
Yeah.
and it's such a fascinating story, and I didn't know more about it like in depth until a few years ago. When I did some research on her, but just like she had this voice and she used it, and that's where I found out that the root of like addiction, how it was like a real thing and how it was a thing for a long time, and that's what's something that she suffered and she battled with as well. And so I just find it fascinating just to kind of, if I could just like walk with her and just observe, her life and just have a conversation with her and just see what her thoughts were and like what she thinks like of her present time, like what was going on.
Yeah. Oh, beautiful. All great. If I was to pick one person, I think it would probably be Keith Haring, the pop artist. Because he accomplished so much in his short life and left such a
Mhm.
lasting impression. And my art soul just loves him. But
Oh.
that's who I would pick. That would make for a really great party, though, guys. Really great dinner party.
Mhm.
The three of us with all of them. But I
Oh
really
my gosh, yes.
appreciate it all. And that's a wrap, guys, on this episode of Pop Culture Expose. A huge thank you to both Cassandra Crose and Kimberly Bryant for joining me today. We've had such a blast talking about the early days of Hollywood, the glitz and the glamour of the golden age, and of course, diving into some of the latest award show buzz. It is clear that while we may not be historians, we all love ourselves some pop culture, whether it's from the past or what's happening right now. So, if you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to follow Cassandra and Kimberly. I will make sure to share their information with all of you. You can catch Kimberly on her podcast, Pop Culture Green Room, where she and her co-host twin sister break down all of the juiciest gossip and pop culture moments. And of course, Cassandra on Drenched in Drama on social media as well, and where you listen to podcasts. And lastly, and of course, if you love this conversation, make sure to hit that subscribe button, leave a review, and tune in next time. We've got plenty more pop culture deep dives, celebrity blinds, and behind the scenes stories coming your way. So thank you for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode of Pop Culture Expose, where we cover revolution, rock stars, and rumors, scandals that shaped the 60s and 70s. So thank you, ladies.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Tune into the buzz, it's the talk of the day. From Bravo shows to the latest celeb spree. We've got the tea, come sip it with me. Danny Gossip Girl, Pop Culture Expose. We're spilling all the secrets every single